I think you're going to find um, it's right on target, okay? And I'm going to just let him go through it, tell us about your new homepage on or your new website, and then begin to do the 9 points. So, James, take over. And if you have questions or things you want me to respond to, feel free to ask me at the time.
Arlene, it's a pleasure to be here always. This is like our fifth time, so we'll probably talk till they run out of tape or digital memory or whatever they do. My very first remark is I used to be ahead of my time. In fact, I grew up my entire life being ahead of my time. As I get older, I'm finally on time.
All right.
So it's an interesting place in my life as I've grown up, and the things that I brought with me coming into this lifetime, you might say, are my earliest impressions, and watching the world turn and spin and learning my way around it and through it and popping out. And here I am in my early 60s, if you will, and I find myself on time finally. So, and then you're a part of that because you helped me bring my work out as to so many people, and so here we all are. And as I remarked a little bit earlier, the Dick Cheneys have had their fun and their fair time, and now it's time for humanity as a species to start waking up and measuring what's true for us and refining our own very nature and plugging back in and maybe starting to be a little more like flowers and reaching toward what's true. So
that's a very interesting point. And what it is it's again just takes over where we are, and that's the interesting part of it. The Sedona Journal of Experience of Emergency has wonderful articles, and the one that they did for the beginning of 2014, if you haven't had a chance to look at it, does and has so many things in it that are right on target. And it was interesting because I'd been reading that, and I was reading something else, and then when I got your notes on what you were doing with it, they were so much in synchronicity that we are now, and as you say, this is your time. This is what it was all about. This is why you came, and you had to learn all of these other things along the way, so that now you can be a spokesperson for the new earth and the new age. But I'm building up things, so I don't want to do that for you.
well, it's our time. I mean, we remarked before the cameras started that we talked about the idea, you called it the new earth, the idea of the second coming, the idea that the human species as a whole is the Son of God. And this next iteration of life is us. It's not, maybe there's individuals a little bit closer to being able to document what they learn a little bit faster, and maybe there's people out in front a little bit, but nobody goes till we all go. Nobody goes. And I think we have a whole new, so what's going on is we're learning how to interpret what's going on around us. And I like to start with the idea that our nervous system is our connection with the cosmos. Kind of a wild idea for a lot of people. A lot of people think that we're heart-driven, and really what we are, in my opinion, is it's the nervous system when it's in resonance with the cosmos is felt as what is described as a heartfelt experience. That's actually the nervous system resonating with the cosmos. And what core resonance is about is refining and cleaning up the nervous system, because the nervous system is like an antenna. And so as we clean up, what's clean up the nervous system mean? It means like drama, trauma, and all the things that we unconsciously carry causes when innate intelligence expresses through us, because that's really what happens. We're a connection with the cosmos is a connection with us. And as every living thing on this planet is an expression of innate intelligence or God expressing, as it expresses through us, it expresses with a great deal of distortion, because as human beings, we have a lot of opinions. And love and opinions are mutually exclusive. In other words, our true job is to become a means by which innate intelligence can express through us without distortion. That's actually the definition of unconditional love. Unconditional love is about our capacity to find what's true, line up with it, and have no resistance to it at all. So that this mechanism that is the cosmos can express through us without distortion, and frankly, it's how the solutions will be delivered to this planet, through humans. I'm sure dolphins do it, I'm sure whales do it, I'm sure the flowers do it as well, but the humans with opposable thumbs and laptops and Priuses and whatever else we are, we have more capacity, and in our capacity, without the distortion, that's the new earth. That's where the new earth comes from. And of course, core resonance is about that.
All right, and I think this is an important point, and it's a reality that has come up so many times recently in reading, okay? And that's the synchronicity with the natural state of being, okay? And I think that's important to us. And I'm going to ask you to go on to your second point there. Our existence and allegiance belongs first and foremost to God.
Well, so let's say you're talking about law. There's issues of jurisdiction. To whom are you beholden for your existence? I don't want to get off into the law, but jurisdiction is a big issue, and human beings have to understand jurisdiction and to whom they're beholden for their existence. It ain't the United States government, and it ain't the state, and it's not the law, it's God. I use the term source, innate intelligence. I've been using the divine lately, cosmos, truth with a capital T, and that's to whom we owe our allegiance. And getting back in sync with what's true is fundamental to our very nature. And I would also say that humans put a lot of stock in the economic system for their security. Stocks and bonds, money piled up, investments, and on and on. And as we know, I was just reading something by Ken Carey just a few nights ago. In one of his remarks, I think he said in 2008, or possibly it was 2010, half of the wealth of humanity had been gobbled up by a few certain people, the people that run the banks and blah, blah, blah. And so what that means is that the economic system is not where we find our security and our safety. And so my remark, our existence and allegiance belongs first and foremost to God, is if we want to become true and line up with what's true, we need to line up with what's true. And so that's what that remark's about.
All right, and that makes sense too for the things that I've read elsewhere about the new earth and what we're going to be doing. And one of the things that comes out so much in various things that I've read is our connection to God, our connection to the God force within us, and how it works and how it's moving us in different directions. And hearing you say what you're saying is part of what is a focal point for that. So I think this is a very strong new step for us.
Well, think about nature. Think about the order that nature abides by. You can't even count the human cells in the cells in the human body, much less the amount of mechanisms that are in nature. Not to mention, I mean, all the different kinds of flowers, all the different kinds of plants, all the different kinds of animals, all the different kinds of minerals, all of that is orchestrated by something in common. And, you know, God's a good term. I don't use the term God often because it kind of, for some people, it still suggests an old man in a wheelchair. That's perfect. You know, in a rocking chair with a beard and all that, but there's a commonality that everything shares, and my truth revolves around finding the governance that everything abides by. There's a single scale of order, there's a single scale of alignment and governance that everything abides by, and plugging back into that is what we need to do as a species, and you can see it in all of nature. Nature is order, order, order. I mean, even when parts of nature or animals become extinct, there's an allowing of that process, and there's an order. There's no dysfunction in nature. It's It's, in fact, nature extends out past Jupiter, out past the solar system. It extends forever. There's a scale of order that everything abides by, and the humans, as we learn how to plug back into that, will be much more successful.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, because just recently I read in, I don't know where it was, what I was reading, one of the papers, or else it might have been on a bit of television. I can't remember where it was. They talked about, I think it was the paper though, I think it was the fact that there are like 700 new planets that they've uncovered. And that's just the beginning of a whole new dimension of what's out there in our galaxies and in our world.
Yeah, there's water. Now we got water on the moon, got water on Mars. In fact, there's been oceans of water on Mars. I mean, really deep oceans of water on Mars. There's water in the asteroids. I think there's water in space as H2O. And there's so many things we didn't know just a few years ago. And in fact, our capacity to learn, we're just at the merest beginning. In fact, the 60s and the 70s and even the 80s, maybe even any time before the internet, was absolutely the dark ages. And yeah, there's a lot of dumb stuff going on, but gosh, we're moving fast as a species.
That's one of the things that are being talked about too, the planetary energies, and the fact that things are moving much faster, and that it's this movement, we have to move with it in order to understand what the next step or the next focus is going to be. And it's interesting that you pointed out pointed out, because humankind is beginning to move more faster, to take new looks at things, and to understand some of this. If you think back maybe 20, 30 years ago, talking the way we're talking now would have put us on the
chopping block.
Yeah.
Certainly a couple hundred years ago, where our heads would be gone by now.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part of it. Now, right now, I mean, there's nothing about this that surprises some of the younger generation. And even those of us in our generation who have seen this happening and who know it's been happening and are delighted to see it's finally taking a focus with, quote, humankind in a more easily recognized way. So it's just an incredible time. It's a really, they talk about the star seeds, they talk about the facts that people who are on the planet now are here because they want to be, and they have a job to do in this next generation of events. And I think this is probably very true, because it's so different than what the old Earth was, in a sense. It has a little different standards, it has a little different focus, a little different understanding, and it's just beginning to move out there. So,
well, think about the idea of now this is my work, and my work says that our nervous system is our connection with the cosmos. Like a living antenna system, and in fact the idea is we are receivers, as is everything on this planet. Everything, in my opinion, everything is a subset of God. God, innate intelligence, universal mind, whatever you want to call it, is what is, and everything is a subset of that. So everything is an expression of God expressing. The humans, we're not any different from that. We're just fancier versions of means by which innate intelligence expresses into this dimension. And our nervous system, in my opinion, is that connection. And what happens is the humans what happens is the humans somehow got off track. And when we had this natural state of connection, we had access to presence, we had access to guidance. And as we got out of our connection with innate intelligence and lost that access to guidance, which everything else on the planet naturally has, the humans, the biggest single part of the nervous system is the brain, and the brain converted from being part of this receiving system, and the brain became a processor, and the humans started using their brain as a processor to work their way around on the planet, and that's why we're so dysfunctional right now. Core resonance, and then when the brain got on overload, because it gets on overload in a hurry based on the amount of information that's out there, the brain set up the mind as a repository of automated, habitual, and reactionary responses, so we're not taking in more information we can handle because the brain is on overload. And so the mind becomes synonymous with resistance. The mind becomes set up to keep the brain from taking more information than it can handle. It becomes responsible for your survival. It becomes responsible for defensive posturing. It becomes the source of fear and doubt, resistance and reaction. And that's where we are as a species, and core resonance is about cleaning that up. And of course we have different, now I have more tools than ever for getting us back on track. And the main point I wanted to make was that when we recognize the part resistance plays in our lives, in other words, we go around a corner, we don't want to be surprised, we don't want more than we can handle, so we go around the corner kind of steeled, kind of prepared for not taking in more than we want. This overload thing's a big deal. And so my work is about quieting the nervous system, re-enabling this natural state of connection, and re-enabling it, we become exponentially more useful, because as innate intelligence flows through us, not only does it give us guidance and access to presence, but it delivers solutions, and we become a means by which solutions are delivered into this dimension. And the key word I wanted to talk about was resistance, because when we're in resistance, all of that goes out the window, and that's how we sit as a species, kind of on overload.
Very interesting, and again, very well focused and very directive to what I'm coming to understand a little bit about all this processing that's going on. Now, human beings are immensely powerful, but without guidance and connection, dangerous to themselves and their environment. Can you put some insight into that?
Interesting. You must be psychic, because that's what I just explained, basically, is that when without access to our natural state of guidance, like a rose, a forest is absolutely plugged in to the cosmos. It gets all of its guidance. A rose gets all of its guidance. The mineral kingdom gets all of its guidance from its connection. And humans, because we have so much capacity, when we're outside of this connection, we can be very destructive, and frankly we are. I don't want to get into Fukushima and some of these other things. Do you know there's a 580 square mile site on the Columbia River, which is a major river going into the Pacific, and right in, it's called a nuclear reservation. We've got all of our nuclear waste, and the Columbia River flows right through that 580 square miles. That's any kind of leakage dumps into the Pacific. We've already got it from Japan, and my point is, humans, we have all this potential. We drive around in Lexuses and all this sophistication, but without guidance we're really destructive, and we're about to push ourselves off the planet. The planet's going to keep going. I think the forests will keep going, and this new Earth, this is about re-enabling this connection, because without it we are dangerous to ourselves and we're dangerous to our environment, and this is part of the wake-up call of humanity, and it's actually a really good time.
Okay, and it does fit. It's just amazing as more and more people talk about this and explore it and discover what is there, it coincides with the actuality of what's going on.
It's common sense.
Yeah.
Duh, it's just common sense.
Which we haven't had and used in quite a while.
No.
Well, let's take a look at your fourth point here. Core resonance teaches this transition by employing proprietary tools to jumpstart this connection. Can you explain that a little bit?
Core resonance, when I wrote Visionaries Thrive in All Times, and I'll tell you, this is not only is this a great book, but this one is dog-eared, and it's got lots of paper clips in it. It's got, in fact, almost any page I open to, you got highlights in it and things underlined. So that makes that a great book.
Well, it is. It was fabulous when I first read it.
When I wrote that book, and I have 3 books, most of a 4th, and then a 5th book coming, which is called Patterns and Habits. But I don't know if we're going to get into patterns and habits. It's what the brain sets up when it's on automatic. When the brain's on overload, it uses the mind. The mind sets up patterns and habits, and we live our lives stuck in the patterns and habits that we chose, and generally speaking, chose unconsciously. That's where we are as a species. But so the idea of jump-starting this connection Initially, my work revolved around my big discoveries. Besides, I've got now almost 40 years of meditating. Was I discovered neurofeedback and how it could be used to advance consciousness. And so I've got 5 or 6 years in developing that, and it's extremely powerful and it's extremely capable, and I've even worked with soccer teams and things like that. But it's still a big step for a lot of people. And while there's lots of people that are ready to go into something like this, and it's relatively sophisticated and costs a decent chunk of change, what I've been doing, as I've come to understand what I have, I've started creating baby steps. And for example, the first baby step, if you will, is something that's free, that's on my website. And my website, Core Resonance, resonance.com, offers an article I wrote in 2007, actually after finishing Visionaries Thrive in All Times. And the article is called Free Cell and the Keys to the Universe. And what makes this article interesting is what I discovered when I was writing Visionaries Thrive in All Times, because at 93,000 words, it was a very big project. I never intended on writing a book, much less spending 3 years and 9 months full time on this. And there was many times when I didn't think I could finish, or I was daunted is the word that comes to mind. It was an overwhelming project. And so what I would do is I would escape to the game Free Cell, and as I would play it, I eventually learned that I was playing it rote and just habit, and I would lose games and I'd lose games and I'd win games and I'd win games and whatever. And eventually I learned that if I would stop playing the game, the Free Cell game, when I started to lose, before I lost, and go back to what I was doing and then come back to the game later, I would invariably see moves I could not see before. Now that's interesting because, first off, it showed me there were always solutions available if but I could see them, and that was actually what powered my ability to complete the book. And so I eventually wrote the article. The book was finished in 2005. I wrote this article in 2007 because it was such a powerful concept that when I would start to lose the Free Cell game, it'd be similar to solitaire, but I think it needs to be played on a computer. That when I'd start to lose a game, if I would walk away from the game, because losing means you're not seeing the moves. That's what it means. And so if you'd come back to the game later and see moves you couldn't see and invariably win the games afterward, I realized that if we're not seeing what's in front of us, we're missing what's going on. And in the end, that becomes the definition of prosperity. In other words, everything is in front of us if but we could see it. And that's actually the first step of what's become the graduating version of working your way into the work that I do, which is start out with Free Cell and the Keys of the Universe and see that even though you can't see it, it's right in front of you, and if you come back, you'll see things you couldn't. And from there I go into the 100-Day Prosperity Plan, which is another step.
Okay, and we'll get into that as we go along and have you talk about about that. Your next point here is resistance and the inadvertent source of much of our reality creating. Explain that a little bit. How do you see that in this?
That's when I first off, law of attraction is a really important component of my work. I've taught personal empowerment for a long time, since 1990. And there came a point, I was introduced to the Abraham Hicks material in maybe 1994, maybe 1996, a long time ago. And so what you focus on expands is a very powerful concept. Like attracts like. In other words, your unconsciously held beliefs, your subconsciously held beliefs are really more where your reality creating comes from. And so you can say what you focus on expands, and that's true to a degree. But more your core, what's inside your core, is where your reality creating comes from. Like attracts like. One day, I realized that resistance is focus. So if what you focus on expands and resistance is focus, and humans are in overload, and resistance is our natural state, if you will, because we're on overload, the brain's on overload. Joe Dispenza, he was in What the Bleep. He says the brain consciously processes 2,000 bits of information a second. consciously process. Unconscious is different. Consciously processes 2,000 bits of information a second, and there's 400 billion bits of information ever changing out there. I guarantee you the brain is not designed to be a processor. And I can tell you we don't multitask worth a... we don't multitask
Wow.
very well at all because the brain was never meant to be a processor. And so when all of a sudden I tied resistance and law of attraction together, a whole big piece of the puzzle jumped out. And when we are on overload. The ego is set up as a survival mechanism. In other words, the brain on overload, trying to process the world. It can't do it. Sets up the mind, says no more, no more, no more, no more. Settles into automated and habitual patterns. And what's interesting is that resistance is behind all of that. And there goes the species. So my work says what we need to do is clean up our natural state of connection, and in doing so, resistance fades. This connection, this circuit becomes re-enabled. We start, excuse me, we move back into presence, and in presence we have access to guidance, or in presence we have guidance. That's what presence is all about. And then we go forward. So resistance is focus, and the inadvertent source of much of our reality creating is a very interesting and very powerful statement.
Okay. All right. Do you want to take a moment or two to talk more about that?
Well, let's go to the next one just for fun. Simply relaxing our reactionary output calms our reality creating. So this is like the free cell game. If you start to lose, you kind of get reactive. You kind of get, frenetic's way too strong, but you move into these rote modes of doing things. And if you would just relax instead of running like a train down a track that you can't control the speed, if you could avert that kind of mentality, that kind of habits and patterns, your reality creating would change just by that alone. In other words, one of the things I talk about, I think it's an article I have called The Promise of Core Resonance, I talk about the gap. And the gap is a gap that we can develop between ourselves and the world. And in that gap, innate guidance can show up. But in that gap, we're not instantly reacting, because most of us react to the world. There's a lot of people with a lot of money, or people that appear to be doing well, and they are reacting to the ideas of poverty when they were a young kid. And their whole lives are driven by having money. Okay, they're polished, and I'm not saying having money is bad. There's a lot of people that acquire wealth naturally and do so in a very coherent fashion. But acquiring money doesn't solve problems, and a great deal of people have what they have based on reacting to things maybe in their childhood. In fact, a lot of our grown-up lives are a product of things that impacted us when we were very young. And my idea is that we need to move away from what drove us in a reactionary process to who we have become. And you can see that in the species in general. And so as we relax, maybe that's what meditation's about, relaxing for a minute. That's what sleeping's about. The Abraham Hicks people would tell you, Abraham would tell you that sleeping turns your reality creation mechanism off for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 hours, because if we were creating realities the way we do, we would absolutely exhaust ourselves. So I don't want to belabor it too much, but relaxing and meditating, a little bit of yoga, and a little bit of slowing down and finding a different pace, because I promise you, otherwise the human species is based on reacting to its surrounding, reacting in resistance to its surrounding, and it's beating us up pretty bad. We got to learn another way.
All right, I do understand that, and I think that's part of what, again, some of the readings that I've done bring that up in different ways as part of the new earth and part of what we will, as a humanity, eventually do. So, and that's a good point, because when you think about it, when you relax, sometimes just sitting outside under an apple tree or whatever, it just brings things in that if you were sitting beside a computer would drive you crazy. So
now, drive some people crazy. Now, some people do presence in front of a computer, and that's how we get all this stuff written down.
Well, that's true too. That's true too. It's whatever you relax with.
Exactly. So there's a lot to be said for an apple tree, because nature is a perfect example of God. You'll find there's a scale of order out there, and if you can go mesh with nature for a while, that if you surround yourself with nature, certainly for moments at a time and even longer periods, and you emulate nature or you just take hints from it, you'll find access to presence. And that's where your mind, in the apple tree, in the apple orchard, and your mind was able to wander around into the stratosphere and farther out. The whole idea of nature is, in fact, nature can be mathematically defined as sacred geometry, and sacred geometry, of course, is the language of God. I'm not going to get off into that, but what I like here is our next one. It's called, some call this the zone.
All right, talk about the zone.
I don't know who wrote this stuff, but so what is the zone? The zone is when we relax. Now, how could relaxing be relaxing when your mind's running 100 miles an hour? So that's the hard part. But meditation, yoga, and core resonance, of course, and the different things I offer and lots of other people offer. But think about the athletes. I'll say Michael Jordan, and I don't know Michael Jordan really well at all. I mean, I don't follow basketball to speak of. But I do know that there's more and more sports figures are discovering moving out of their mind on the playing field, and they move into the zone. Now, the zone is presence. When I did a talk for a soccer team in Mexico, and the talk was called Goats with Eyes in the Back of Their Heads. This is for the Chivas team in Guadalajara a few years ago. And the idea was the team goes down the field with one idea in mind, and that's to make a goal at the other end. And what I tried to explain was that the team members go down as nervous systems. Our nervous system is our central component. And I'm sure soccer players, they whistle and they yell, and I'm sure there's echo reflections as they go down the field, and they can hear each other and they can identify who's who, and there's all kinds of grunts and noises and all these kinds of things. And the more attuned the nervous system is, the more they go down the field together. So you've got people so Michael Jordan is in the zone, and the more his team members are in the zone, the more they go down the field together, go down the court together, and the better they score. It's a great analogy. And so what we're learning, my hairs are all standing up on my arms and it's inside my jacket, the more the humans access presence, and sometimes you have to be lucky with presence. I mean, I've got 40 years of meditating now. Core resonance can give you that in a couple of years with the neurofeedback, my proprietary neurofeedback and all that. But if we can get to presence and quiet down, and the problem is it's not a mind-driven experience, but if you can get there, that's the zone. And in the zone, ask Michael Jordan, everything is possible in the zone. And so presence is a big item. Accessing presence, you can't get to presence from the mind. It's not a mind-driven experience. But the zone is important, and core resonance is about taking people to the zone.
How would you take people to the zone?
Well, there's actually several steps. One, I would start people with Free Cell and the Keys of the Universe to discover that there's a world beyond what you traditionally see, if but you could see it, and it's a great game to learn how to do it. You can go to Core Resonance and sign up, and you can get that as a free email that comes back to you. The intermediate step is the 100-day prosperity plan. And I'll tell you what's interesting is I finished Visionaries Thrive in All Times. I introduced it in early 2005. And about that time, I put my first website up, Visionaries Lab. And the 100-day prosperity plan I had developed, I had taken the John Randolph Price's Abundance book, and I rewrote it and the concept of it for myself, and I moved it to the computer, and I started doing these lessons, and I made it all up. I developed it, and at 103 days, I met my first physicist, which was right at the time that the book was printed, went to the publisher. And that was Vern Wolf, and he and I worked together 6 months, and then we went our separate ways, and I met my second physicist, and things just took off like crazy. Everything has happened, And it all came from the 100-Day Prosperity Plan. And I just realized this just recently. Now it turns out I've done the 100-Day Prosperity Plan 4 times. In fact, today I'm in day 17 doing it again. I wrote this stuff a long time ago. Here I'm doing my own stuff. And so the 100-Day Prosperity Plan is about saturating the mind. Now we know the mind ain't that good a tool, but it's all we got if it's all we got. And so using the 100-Day Prosperity Plan, we can saturate the mind with a certain type of affirmation, by the way, the 100-Day Prosperity Plan is actually called the 100-Day Prosperity Plan and Connection to the Divine. Because re-enabling our natural state of connection with the cosmos is the whole secret. And if we're not ready to go all the way to the whole level of what core resonance is capable of through the neurofeedback aspect and this and that, the 100-Day Prosperity Plan carries people, well, first off, 100 days of saturating yourself with a certain caliber of affirmation, and then the insight component that goes with it. Insight is that introspective part of us that we need to learn to develop, and core resonance is all about that. Core resonance training is kind of my high-end tool. The 100-Day Prosperity Plan is my inexpensive tool that I think it's $297 right now. Price is going to be going up, but it's at $297. And every aspect of the 100-Day Prosperity Plan, or I should say there's 2 components, and each lesson, each day, includes an introspective part. And it's great to do affirmations, but what you want to do is find the depth of them. So if you can have an affirmation like, I want a brand new red convertible with fancy wheels and a certain kind of radio and blah, 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 like we did in the old days, or an affirmation can be true about your connection with spirit. And it's important that it be done right. And then what you want is the reflection of using that affirmation. And that's what the 100-Day Prosperity Plan is about. Saturating the mind with an idea, and then what does it mean to you in the introspective component. And if at 103 days I got my first and my English teacher let me out of high school. And now I've got quantum physicists that I work with, and I've got 3 books and most of a 4th and a 5th coming. Yeah, I have a lot of common sense, but what I have is a quiet brain. Actually, the alpha frequency is where presence comes from. And I have a connection to the divine. And that's the game. That is the game. So now I have these are all new, these recent tools. Actually, the 100-Day Prosperity Plan was written in 2000. I don't know if it was written in 2004 or 2007. I think it actually was 2007, the same time that the Free Selling the Keys to the Universe was written. So here I am going back to my old stuff, and I'm astounded by what I was doing back then. So now I'm bringing my basic tools out to anybody that wants to use them.
All right. That's
it's interesting.
Quite interesting. And I'm sure it's going to continue opening doors one way or another. And this is going to be part of what you will do and introduce to other people.
Right.
So, never a dull moment with you here. The next one, delivery of your potential to the world becomes dramatically more available. You've been talking about that a little bit. Is there anything else you want to go into with that?
Well, let's say, first off, the I Ching, where is, Freud and the earliest psychology. There was no psychology before the I Ching was translated into English. And one of the things the I Ching did was identify 8 primary personality types, 8 sets of wiring of humans, 8 personality types. And so delivery of our potential to the world becomes dramatically more available. First off, all of us are wired for something. We also have our interpretation of what we're wired for. And but when we have resistance and reactionary posturing as a primary component, it's hard to deliver our potential. So what core resonance is about is quieting our nervous system so that we can become a mechanism by which innate intelligence delivers solutions through us into this dimension. I say the human species has gone past the point of no return in a linear reality expression. In other words, the mind has done so much destruction on the planet that the mind is not going to solve it. Ask Barack Obama or the rest of them. Those guys have no idea what they're doing. None. Absolutely none. And we're going to have to move to an exponential type of thinking. We're going to have to plug back into what's true to solve our problems. And so part of what this idea, number 8, delivery of your potential to the world becomes dramatically more available, is about this circuitry of reaching to innate intelligence, moving the trauma out of our system, quieting our minds, quieting our brains, quieting our nervous system so that this connection can be re-enabled, and us reaching up to it, it comes back to us and through us for what I call the ride of our lives, by the way. But it delivers solutions. And so delivery of our potential to the world becomes dramatically more available. That is what core resonance is about, yes.
Very interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that, again, is going to be looked at in a different way and in so many situations. And there's just so many, what shall I call it, techniques that will come out that at one point in time would have been considered not available and not usable, but is where we are right now, and it's very much a focus of what's happening on the planet.
Right.
And your core resonance, I think, in many ways is a way of making that available to people, making that.
You know, one of the things core resonance is a fast track. Let's say you're 40 or 50 years old, never meditated in a day in your life, and kind of wished you had but never had, and all of a sudden you want to contribute to making the world a better place. What do? Okay, you can spend a lot of money in the right place. There's lots of things you can do. But if it's really not about money as much as it is re-enabling your natural state of connection, core resonance, we can use core resonance and the technology I've developed to give. And one of the things I say with core resonance is that core resonance training is 2 years of core resonance training is the equivalent of 30 years of meditating. And what's 30 years of meditating? 30 years, and frankly it's more than that, I just called it 30 years. But what 30 years of meditating is quieting your nervous system. For the most part, for all my years of meditating, I described meditation as the act of learning how to listen with your nervous system. It's not meditation is not a mind-driven experience at all. And eventually this introspective aspect of me came to see that meditation is about your nervous system. That's where I guess I discovered it's your center in all these years of meditating. And so quieting the nervous system is what we need to do. And if you're really young, starting early with meditating is a great idea, but it takes a lifetime.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in speeding that process up, and so I've taken what I've learned and developed tools to quicken the possibility, and we're going to have to quicken things. Of course, there's an order that everything abides by. The question is, do the humans get to hang around for it? And that's really up to us, and I think we're going to have to wake up and kind of wake up in a hurry. But I would also say there's an order that everything shares, and I do mean everything, and even humans are not the exception of that. So,
okay, that's telling us we only have 5 more minutes
exactly.
to go.
Right.
What are some of the things that you might want to add to this in sort of as a kind of a conclusive type of thing, so that people out there, what is the quickest way of their getting in touch with you and with core residents, and what would you suggest that they do, because you're so much on target with things? Can you give a sort of a focus point here into what they should do?
Well, let's go to point number 9.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Courage. The break point on the map of consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins is the first step. It's almost like we're in sync, Arlene. Now, for those of you who don't know the map of consciousness, or Dr. David Hawkins, first off, he had the largest private psychiatric practice in New York City in the 1950s. I understand he had 700 psychiatrists under him.
Wow.
And of course he became an alcoholic at some point, moved out to Sedona, which is where I live. dried out, built a house. In fact, he cut his thumb off building his own house. He has, I don't know if he has 5 acres. He's out there in Lower Red Rock Loop Road. Of course, he's died now. But he developed, and he got real involved in kinesiology, muscle testing. In fact, it's what brought him back out into the world, and he's now written possibly 6, 7 books now. But one of the things he identified in his first book is the map of consciousness. And the map of consciousness is a scale of 0 to 1,000, and from 0 to under 200 are the states of apathy, fear, grief, anxiety, rage, whatever, up through jealousy. And the states 700 to 1,000 are the states of enlightenment. And the middle states are joy, peace, neutrality, love, joy, and where we want to be in our lives. And what's interesting is this scale is exponential. For example, one person at 700 counterbalances 70 million people below 200. One person at 600 counterbalances 10 million people below 200. This is why consciousness is so important, becoming more evolved. And so the interesting point I'm making is that courage at 200 is the break point on this map. So the first step is courage.
All right.
The first step is courage. And then what I've done is I've laid out what I would believe stepping stones, starting with the free cell and the keys of the universe. I think it's a marvelous, people get it when they do it. It's there. And then from there, go into the 100-day prosperity plan. And then once you've done 100 days of the prosperity plan, you'll have a sense of who the heck I am and what I think I've got. And then I can show you to some of my fancier tools.
All right. It's very, 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 very interesting there. Let's see if I can pull up here. Well, once again, give us some insight to the new newsletter, Yoga Meditation Coherence, and the Super Bowl.
Oh, well, that was talking about how the team that won the Super Bowl, the Seattle Seahawks, they absolutely trounced Peyton Manning and the other team. I barely know any of this stuff. But I discovered afterward that the entire team meditates and the entire team does yoga, and it's not because they're forced to. The entire team meditates, the entire team does yoga, and they were heads and shoulders over the Denver Broncos team. I mean, not even close. And I don't watch football. I caught the second half, just before the second half, and watched the rest of the game. It was startling, the difference between the teams. So that was one of the blog posts in my new core resonance site. What I would like to say is that prosperity is in front of us all the time if what we could see it. In other words, prosperity isn't so much about money. I wrote something. I wonder if I have it with me. I know we're running out of time. I wrote this just a few days ago. What if prosperity is not about money? What if prosperity is about synchronicity, harmony, and order in the quality of our reality creating? What if money is just a stopgap for when your reality creating falters a bit? What if proper reality creating brings us everything we need, and again, money as energy and storage fills in the gaps when our reality creating is not up to par? What did prosperity and abundance look like before money? And so what I say is the free cell game will show you things you couldn't see that are right in front of you on the cards, and you don't see them. And if you walk a gate away from the game and come back, you will see something you couldn't see, and that is an entry point into the new earth.
Wow. I think that's a good summary. And here we are. We're back down to a minute, basically, of what we have to do. And what I guess I would say, if that could be very much a concluding statement for you in terms of this, because it does take us to where we need to go and what we need to do, and I think it's a very good one. And I guess I better quickly thank you, Jim, for being back again and coming again somewhere down the line. I missed contact with you, and when we did get that contact point, I was very happy to do that, and I think there's just so much that's going on. And I think those of you out there in the audience, if you have questions, get in touch with him and see what he has to tell you or what he suggests for you, or go and do some more listening with his work and what he does. And again, I thank you so very much for being back here. There's a lot more to come, I'm sure. So hopefully we'll be spending time in different time zones, and you'll bring out some more of what you've done. So would you like to tell the audience, give them one last statement beside what you did there?
How about thank you, Arlene? How about thanking you for what you do and the part that you've played and you've always played. And you know, there's all these little pivot points on the planet of contribution, and some people seeing first before others ideas and grounding them and holding tight to their vision and their beliefs. And you know, I wish we had time to tell the story how we actually met. And remember, I showed up. I needed a place to stay. We had never even met, and I was sitting in a parking lot. And I won't get off into that story, but I decided to go sit in presence. I had something I needed to do. I couldn't get it done. How was I going to solve my problem? And it just came into my head, and I called you. Your name shouldn't even have been in my cell phone. And there it was, and that's how we actually connected and sat up till 2:30 in the morning that night. And now we've got 5 shows and having a lot of fun.
And I thank you again, Jim. You are so on target. This is why I say to the audience out there, check him, get in touch with this, because he's part of the new designer of the future in certain ways. And so once again, thank you for coming. Thank you, audience, for coming. And if you have something you want to say or something you want to tell me, feel free to do that. Thank you, Jim.